constantly reaching for the stars. And I think it takes mad dreamers on both sides to come together and make history.
He is an artist in his own right. Where an artist may use a paintbrush, James will use a person. It's brave because a paintbrush can't answer back. If I was a tool in his artistic vision, then it was a lot of fun.
Hello, and welcome back to the High Fidelity TV podcast. We are in a special episode. We are just going to be talking about the 2016 musical documentary, The Man from Mowax. As usual, I am your host, Joseph Ngo, here with my co-host and good friend, Edwin Lee. How you doing, Edwin?
Doing fantastic. How are you?
Very well, very well. Thank you for joining me on this documentary. Very similar to our Scratch topic of conversation. So another music doc. So very excited to talk about that with you, my friend.
Likewise.
All right. Any High Fidelity news? I don't think so. I didn't look that up. So they're still canceled, right?
Yeah, I don't see it coming back anytime soon.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Right. Yeah, what was the last movie we talked about? So we haven't done this in a while. So excuse our kind of, all over the place-ness. We're still going to have a structure, of course. We're going to have an intro section. We're going to have a top 5 list for you guys. Get into the movie The Man from Mowax. And then give our rating of it at the end of the episode and our closing thoughts. And that's going to be the episode. Edwin.
Yes.
I had a question lined up for me, but I just had a complete brain fart. And it just vacated my mind completely. Oh yeah, so Bad Santa was our last thing we talked about, right? And that really didn't have any records in it. I know we were supposed to do like this record-related thing. Off the top of your head, do you have any like other movies that you would want to talk about?
For the High Fidelity music related, it's a good question. I don't know, maybe watching that recent Amy biopic. I don't know if that's worth watching or reviewing, but possibly.
Did you see that already?
I have not
Okay.
seen it yet, no.
Yeah, it looks cool. I mean, the poster looks cool and everything. I don't think it got a wide release. But yeah, I love the Amy documentary. So I think that was released by A24. So yeah, okay. Let's put a pin in that, shall we?
Sure.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, it sucks about High Fidelity, but it is what it is. We talked about that at length in our reunion podcast when we went through the entire series and kind of did a retrospective of that. I think we did that last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it 2022? I think it could have been 2022. Yeah, we did like a 2-year retrospective. And you guys can listen to that on our YouTube channel. And please check us out on Instagram. We are High Fidelity TV Podcast. If you have any feedback, any recommendations of what we should talk about, as you can see, we're struggling to even come up with one there. So please give us some suggestions. Email us at highfidelitytvpodcast@gmail.com. All right, let's get into a little less awkward musings here and get right into our top 5 music docs. This is music documentaries from 5 to 1, and let's start with good pal Edwin.
All right, 5 to 1. In slot number 5 for me is a music documentary from 2003 called Live Forever, The Rise and Fall of Britpop.
How am I not surprised that there'd be a Britpop doc?
It's a good overview of the bands, the music, the cities, and the scenes that different bands came out of. It was a nice historical overview of the context that this time came out of, and I think it was well done. They got a lot of prominent musicians to do the interviews, and they do a good job of using old footage as well. And it's a lot of bands that are near and dear to my heart. So that was my number 5.
What was the title again?
Live Forever: The Rise and Fall of Britpop.
What year was that made?
2003.
Okay, yeah, cool. Is it readily available on platforms so that people could watch it?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never heard of it, so it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's really well done. Number 4 is Amy, 2015. Asif Kapedia's, I hope I'm saying that right. His documentary. It's well done. I love the use of old home video footage. Really does help the viewer to see Amy as a real person. We all know her through her music, but to see her as just a regular person, I think really helped humanize her. The same director's done other interesting documentaries, like one about race car driver Ayrton Senna, and he did an Oasis documentary. But the Amy one really is special. Number 3, Anvil, the story of Anvil, from 2008.
Anvil
is a heavy metal band, thrash metal band that came up around the same time as Metallica, Anthrax, Slayer, Megadeth, but they never hit it big like their contemporaries. And the director does an amazing job of telling their story, and how even though they never hit it big, they never let go of wanting to play music. And so it is an underdog story, and it's really well done. And I think any great documentary will make the person watching it interested, even if the viewer doesn't know a lot or anything about the subject matter. Like I'm not a big metal fan, and I'd never heard of Anvil, but I was captivated by their story, and I was rooting for them, and I think it's through the strength of the storytelling of the director.
So what was the title again?
Anvil, the story of Anvil. Number 2 is similar to Anvil, in the sense that this documentary had me captivated by the story of a band that I didn't know a lot about. And my number 2 is a documentary about the Descendants called Filmage. It's from 2013, and I was familiar with some of the Descendants songs because I had friends that were into it, but I never really listened to them much. But I had read strong reviews of the documentary, so it made me want to see it, and it really was an amazingly made documentary that leaves you feeling like it felt like complete, like you didn't have any questions, or it's just like set up the historical background of the band and their development, and then to the present, and it's a very, very, very interesting ride. So highly recommend that one.
And the Descendants are what kind of band?
Like a punk band
Punk, okay.
from the South Bay, pop punk, I guess you could say. And number one, probably not surprising to you, is Scratch, 2001. Okay. Amazing. Again, like all of the other ones, for someone who doesn't know much about the topic, it'll captivate you and inform you about the topic of the movie. And when I had seen it, I didn't really know a lot about DJ history and DJ culture, but after seeing that, it really did change my life, where it made me want to do what they were doing in the movie, and it was such a big inspiration.
Very good. I think I may have a great list there. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Edwin. A lot of titles that I don't know about, and that's probably well and good. All right, yeah, so let's get into top 5 music docs of mine. Number 5, not really, I guess it's not really a movie, it's a 4-part docuseries on HBO titled The Defiant Ones.
Okay.
From 2017. It focuses on the careers of Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre. Iovine, I believe, founded or was in charge of Interscope Records at one point. So he signed, the likes of Dr. Dre, Tupac, 9 Inch Nails, among many others, right? And it's a 4-parter, very long. It shows, goes all the way back through the careers of Dr. Dre from NWA to the present time of 2017, when he sold his Beats headphone company to Apple for, I believe, $3 billion, the largest acquisition in Apple's history. And it follows, Iovine's history as well. Tom Petty, Stevie Nicks, U2, 9 Inch Nails, as I said. And it's really intricate. It goes in depth into, these two giant moguls' careers and how they kind of, not unlikely, but a very fortuitous partnership between them, and it's didn't have a lot of. It could have. I don't know if people talked about it much back then, but it deserved to be seen. If you're interested in either of these personalities, it goes very in depth. So I highly recommend it. Written by Doug Prey, so one of our favorite guys from Hype and Scratch, as you mentioned before. That's The Defiant Ones. It's on HBO, I believe, so you can watch it on Max or whatever streaming company they decide to name it now, Max Go or what have you. All right, my number 4 is The Show, 1995 documentary about hip hop music. And total honesty, I don't remember much of this movie except like the vibe of it. I know that it covers like a wide array of hip hop artists, right? Looking at the list here, like Africa Bambaataa, Biggie Smalls, Puffy, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, Warren G, Kid Capri, LL Cool J, Craig Mack, Method Man, Melly Mel, Naughty by Nature, Raekwon, Russell Simmons, Slick Rick, Run DMC. I think I said Run DMC already. The Dog Pound, Twins, and Wu-Tang Clan, Houdini. So I remember largely that it was a lot of live show. Have you seen the film at all?
I have not.
Yeah, I remember vaguely that it was a lot of live show performances, but 95 is like the height of, I don't know, gangster rap, the height of rap at its commercial height, right? So, very important film if you're a hip hop head. I remember that and like maybe the other one with the Mac 10 soundtrack. You know what I'm talking about? I can't remember it, but it was that, the show, and that film, and maybe like Black and White that I was really into. But the show definitely like started it all. You know, this whole trend of telling us about the hip hop culture. You know, it's very comprehensive, I would say. Number 3 for me, Thriller 40. It is the documentary about the 40th anniversary of Thriller. Mm-hmm. And what I like about these documentaries, this is still fresh in my mind because I saw it like last year. But Michael Jackson has had a series of these. One for, I believe, the album previous to that. Do you remember what it was called?
Off the Wall.
Off the Wall, thank you. He had one for I believe, the 20th anniversary of Bad. And I believe Spike Lee even. Spike Lee directed the Bad one. What I like about these is like, yeah, they don't get into any of the Michael Jackson controversy. As well, they shouldn't, you know, because it's his record.
On the
music.
Music.
Yeah, it's his record people putting it out. They don't want to deter anybody from watching it. But it's basically like a DVD extra of like the process of all the recording of all the tracks of those albums, you know. So this one goes into in depth about how he, you know, wrote and recorded, you know, the demos for Thriller and Billie Jean and the duet with Paul McCartney, and like who came up with that idea for that collaboration, and who wrote this and that and so forth, you know. What is the meaning of Mama Say Mama Sa Mama Masa, you know, like all that stuff I love about, you know, because I grew up with Thriller. Thriller was a childhood record that I adore, and it's fascinating to see how it was produced, you know. And then it also comes up with, you know, the groundbreaking video that was directed by John Landis, and how he came up with that idea, and how he kept like trying to top himself. And you know, it's really comprehensive. I believe it was directed by Nelson George.
Okay.
Famed, or is it George Nelson? Nelson George.
Nelson George.
Nelson George, like the famed music critic, I believe. So super insightful. If you're a fan of Michael Jackson, if you're a fan of the Thriller album, definitely check out Thriller 40. I highly recommend it. All right, we're overlapping here because my number 2 is Amy.
Okay.
The 2015 film distributed by A24. Love this film. I knew nothing about Amy Winehouse. All I knew was a couple of her hit songs, Rehab, and what was the other one?
I'm not good. I'm no good.
I'm no good, and there was the Back in Black. No, Back in Black.
Back to Black.
Back to Black. Back in Black is the AC/DC song, right? Yeah, man. This is what I love about music documentaries. Like, it goes past all the surface stuff about, you know, their careers, what the marketing portrayed them as, and it shows them as people.
Yeah.
You know, they're flawed human beings, and Amy Winehouse is pretty flawed. You know, she had a pretty rough upbringing, struggled a lot with addiction, right? And it focuses a lot towards the end on a relationship with her father, which I kept thinking about, like, he was like the only one that could save her, you know, and he didn't even try. Like, I believe at one point at the end of her, you know, life, she went on a getaway somewhere, right? She spent some time in Europe, some place in Europe, and then her father joined her to like kind of bond and like kind of, you know, hopefully bring her back down to earth kind of thing, or so she thought. And then it ended up being that he brought a camera crew with him, so he could capitalize off of her fame and exploit it.
Yeah.
You know, because he was probably in debt or something, what have you. And that was a shame. That was such a heartbreaking thing to hear, because I was like, she just wanted to spend time with you. You know, she wanted somebody to relate to her, talk her down. Maybe that was the thing that would have brought her back and kept her off of, you know, heroin and overdosing. But, you know, it is what it is. Addiction is a disease, for sure, and it's a shame. But at least we have her music, you know. But I really love the documentary, really comprehensive, going, you know, all of her phases of the music, how she popularized like that Beehive, the Ronettes, like 60s girl group, fashion, iconography, and all that stuff. So it's really super in depth, if not a bit dark. But, you know, how can you not be? It's a tragic story, right? All right, my number one is Scratch.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edwin, for recommending us to talk about it. I believe we talked about it like in 2021 or something, like maybe 2020. But yeah, before we watched it to review on the podcast, I hadn't seen it for like 10 plus years, so watching it again really brought me back to, you know, that era of when turntablism was at its most popular, when everyone and their mom was going out to buy some Technics turntables to try to scratch. They had like events at Sam Ash where like DJ Curse was there, remember, from the Beat Junkies, and like it was huge. It was the rage, man. It was a phenomenon. If that were today, if that were popular today, it would be all over, you know, TikTok, and we'd be like having scratch challenges and stuff like that. And it was such a golden era of you know, of turntablism. And you're right, you know, it's super comprehensive, and it really introduces the culture and the world to even the layperson, and that's what makes a great documentary. Doug Prey is incredible. Hype, I talked about that earlier, like one of my favorite grunge documentaries, right? So, man, I don't know if he's doing anything anymore these days, Doug Prey, but he definitely cemented his legacy with those two films. And yeah, that's first time we've ever had two number ones the same. So, well, it was kind of slim pickings for me. Music docs were like, at one point I struggled to pick 5. You know, I was just gonna pick some movies I had never even seen before, just to seem cool, but ended up not doing that. So, cool. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so that was our top 5 lists, a la what this podcast is named after, the High Fidelity Podcast. I think Rob would be proud, wouldn't you?
I hope so.
All right, so we're here to talk about, you know, here's the main event, the man from Moax.
What's the secret of your success?
I was always a pushy motherfucker.
Where you going, you're not coming back.
I met DJ Shadow.
Shadow is sort of a genius.
Another day, another batch of sample shit.
I loved him. You know, he was my brother.
You may not have made this sample, you may not have made those drums, but when you put them together, that's an artistry to that. Don't get me wrong, most DJs are fucking retarded.
2016 documentary directed by Matthew Jones, follows the life and career of James Lavelle, the founder, owner, and A&R man of Moax Records. He was a DJ, producer, recording artist, and later like art curator. It stars James Lavelle, DJ Shadow, Richard Fowle, Pablo Clements, Joshua Ohm, Robert Del Naja, Ian Brown, Futura, Tom York, and Grandmaster Flash. That was a surprise. It was made in the UK, released on South by Southwest, and later in the UK in 2018. And so let me go ahead and ask you first, Edwin. What is your prior knowledge of Moax Records and of, if any knowledge of James Lavelle?
I No, Mo Wax, mostly through DJ Shadow and all of the related projects. When I think of Mo Wax, I think of a certain sound and a certain aesthetic. I usually think of like more moody, serious music. I would associate it with kind of a futuristic science fiction, aesthetic. Certainly like beat oriented music. And I know James Lavelle through some of the remixes that were under his name as well. Like he would remix bands that I was a fan of. Like he did a remix of Verve's Bittersweet Symphony. He remixed Queens of the Stone Age, Go With Flow. So some of the crossover to remixing, rock bands, indie rock bands that I was a fan of. To this day, one of a remix of his that I really enjoy listening to is from, maybe not the biggest band, but he did a remix of a song called Only the Strongest Will Survive by a band called Hurricane Number One. And yeah, it has his name on it. It says, James Lavelle remix, and we'll get into this later. Now, after seeing the movie, it makes me wonder, like, how much of the actual like technical remixing in terms of like,
production.
Yeah, putting putting your hands to the knobs and adding different instrumentation was him, and how much of it was just maybe his ideas that other people that worked with him executed for him. So I was fascinated by the documentary because it did help me to understand what James Lavelle was all about, or somewhat.
Yeah, very nice. Well, it seems like you have a lot more previous knowledge about him than I do. Again, what I know about Mo Wax, similar to you, DJ Shadow. We talked off camera or off mic about that record that preceded introducing of DJ Shadow. It was an EP that had like a tribal artwork on it. I still can't find it on. We're like scouring the internet for it, like even on Discogs. Couldn't even find it. I know I have the vinyl, and it's like worn out. So had most of like his hit tracks from introducing on there, and so yeah, I just remember that record, and it had like the Mo Wax label on it in the back, and I owned, before I sold it to my good friend Edwin here, I owned Unkle Science Fiction, which I only listened to once, as we talked about earlier. I just wasn't really my sound. It was a little too aggressive for me, a little too piercing and loud, and too. I don't know. I'm maybe misremembering it wrong, but or misremembering it, but it sounded a bit too rocky, like too rock oriented to me. That's what really threw me off, because I was like, I bought it for DJ Shadow, and DJ Shadow is usually like this like down tempo like instrumentation kind of thing, and it sounded really different from that. So it's really off putting for me at first, but I probably didn't give it a second chance. It probably deserved a second chance for me, but I ended up not doing that and selling it off. So, but yeah, and then watching the documentary, I didn't know that Black Alicious was signed to them. I was a huge early Black Alicious fan, like Nia, is that what you call it? NIA, and like the EPs preceding that era as well were huge. They even had the Alphabet Aerobics track at the end of this documentary, so I was really happy to hear that again. Brought back a lot of memories for me. But yeah, I didn't know anything about the label. I was just like, 1 minute it was this niche thing that was behind a lot of records I bought. The next thing it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know anything. I was just like, okay, that's all I knew about it. So watching this documentary really helped me fill in a lot of those blanks. So let's get into the movie. What did you think about the movie overall?
Overall, it did a good job of painting a picture of this person and getting into his background that informed the person he'd become. It highlighted his strengths, and it highlighted his weaknesses. It highlighted his psyche, so we could see patterns and trends in his personal relationships with people, as well as his aesthetic and what he brought to the table musically, as well as I was saying before, limitations. And overall, I think it created a big picture of what he was about.
Yeah. Very good. I highly agree with everything you said there. Again, I didn't know anything about the man behind the owner of Mowax. I completely thought that Mowax was like San Francisco based, thinking Black Alicious and DJ Shadow were from there, but I didn't know. I didn't really look into the internet in the late '90s, but Mowax isn't just them, right? It's a slew of other recording artists that are from the UK or from other places in Europe. So really fascinating to find that out. And overall, I really like the fact that this film is sprawling. Like, it encompasses, the mid '90s when he, came up as a DJ and wrote like a music newsletter about like his favorite records, like record of the week or record of the month kind of thing. That I think he might have entitled Mowax. That's where Mowax came from, right? Yeah. And all the way to him finding Mowax, like taking it out a year long what do you call that, when you get money from your parents,
allowance.
When he gets like a year long allowance from his mom, and he like buys a deck of turntables and becomes a DJ, gets gigs, and finds Mowax, and becomes like this A&R guy, which is how he starts out. What's what he starts out as before becoming a recording artist, right? And then all the way to the end of Mowax, the end of his second label, and to the end where he's like in serious debt, and has like falling outs with all of like his former friends that were recording artists under his label, and all the way into the curation of the Meltdown Music Festival. Is it a music festival?
Yeah. And
then like doing like art shows and what have you. So we love how it encompasses all that amount of time to show us like the full picture of him. So let's get into we won't get into the scene by scene recap because it's going to be too long for that. But starting, do you have any other things to say about that, Edwin? Before we get into
no, we can get into the more specific aspects of the doc.
Okay, yeah, let's get into the start of his career. Young James. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so the doc starts with his early life, and you can see, his interests and his personality. So the doc talks about how he grew up around music, that his father played with the Dubliners, and I think it mentioned that one of his grandparents, played music as well. It might have been his grandmother, I forget, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, you could see that there's a musical background.
Sure. I think it was the cello, right?
Yeah, his grandmother. And you could also see his interests and his aesthetics. Like there's a picture of him holding up his Star Wars toys, so you could see that, you know, robots and science fiction and the future is you know, an important part.
His mom, sorry to cut you off real quick, but his mom said like he was a weird kid.
Yeah,
you know, he didn't get along with people, and he played, you know, he was into Star Wars and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
Please continue.
She mentioned that, you know, he, you know, was tested, you know, at school or something, and his scores for like imagination were off the chart, but his logical skills weren't so strong. So you know, you can see the creativity and the ideas are there, but maybe the actual, you know, thinking things through and executing them, maybe. And
that's a good point. Yeah.
And so that was a nice kind of setting the stage. It did talk about his parents getting divorced, and so it did obviously, you know, would affect anybody, but it affected him. So he saw music as a comforting escape for him. So he got really heavy into hip hop culture.
Sure.
And yeah, you want to?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the very in-depth descriptions there. Talking about hip hop, his first record was The Flash. The Message. Yeah, The Message by Grandmaster Flash, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. And he describes it as alien.
Yeah.
He says it was alien. It was like science fiction, man. Again, going back to the science fiction thing. So he's always like this weird, far out, spacey kid. You know, he's saying that goes into how he would go off on weekends or whatever to go play tapes with his friends. So from an early age, to continue what you're saying, he's very musically inclined. At one point, he's telling his mom he wanted to be a DJ, and she's like, a DJ? And then he apparently asked her if he could get all his pocket money in 1 year, all of his allowance, like up front, like, can I get an advance on my allowance kind of thing, and got a couple turntables, a couple decks, and started gigging at pubs at age 14. So that was pretty crazy. But with that, you know, of course, comes, you know, that lifestyle that he starts being accustomed to, which is, you know, this nocturnal life of partying and drugs and excess and all that stuff. So really, he started that at 14. Good God. Like, I don't know how you, like, disassociate from that when you grow up, and it's going to be a running theme later on that he doesn't. You know, he's like, what do you call that, when you don't want to grow up?
Like Peter Pan complex.
Like Arrested Development, you know, he's just like refuses to grow and mature. So that's another sign of that, you know. So what's next?
Before we leave this era, like, so he's getting into hip hop. He's spending time. It seems like he was spending time maybe in Bristol, or it seems like he was really influenced by the Wild Bunch, which would later become Massive Attack, and he would work with 3D and Massive Attack, but they seem to be a big influence, you know, in terms of the music and the aesthetic and, you know, and the art and the style.
Thank you. Have you ever listened to any Wild Bunch?
Only really as Massive Attack. I don't know if they put out music. I know they were like a big like DJ crew, and I have a compilation of inspired by, you know, the records they would play. So it was, you know, a lot of early 80s is hip hop stuff. So I understand like the sound and the vibe, but in terms of any early music that they created, I don't know, other than, you know, what Massive Attack ended up doing.
So they were just hip hop before they kind of went down tempo. Was it like more upbeat hip hop, if you can recall that? Or
it's, you know, what you would expect from like early 80s hip hop.
Okay. Yeah. So nothing kind of special, but just like not trip hop yet, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Shall we move on?
Sure, sure.
So he starts, you know, buying a lot of records at 16. I think this is later, I think, but he drops out of school to just, I don't know, work at a record store. That's it. Yeah. He works at a record store and it develops this
reputation for like being the guy who knows music.
Yes. It develops like an addiction to buying records, accumulating all these records as well. And then I forget who recruits him to write the column.
A guy named Paul Bradshaw from Straight No Chaser magazine.
Okay. Nice.
And yeah, so at this point, and this was a big takeaway that James Lavelle had great taste, and that is perfect for like A&R and, you know, being a record producer.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always translate, you know, into becoming an actual musician.
Right.
And I think this movie, you know, hashes that out quite well, that, you know, James, his strength was his sense of style and knowing good music. And so, yeah, he has the confidence to go up to the magazine guy and say, you need me to, you know, write this column. Like, I know my stuff.
Right.
And apparently the Mowax column becomes quite, you know, an influential source to find out what, you know, the hot records were at the time.
I'm playing the film in the background. They had like a definition of A&R man.
Yeah.
Right? Did you happen to write that down?
I did. My copious note taking. It was basically discovering new talent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Discovering and developing.
Yeah.
That was a very crucial part of that, and I enjoy this like background details of, you know, because we always see, you know, marketing people or producers in the studio. We don't know about A&R. A&R is very, very little publicity on those people, but they're very important too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kind of got to keep these people in check. You know, like keep them on schedules. Make sure that they, you know, produce this album or this track on a deadline, or I don't know. Those are producers, right? So, but like, make sure they're happy. You know, make sure they're generally competent in what they're doing at the company. So, not just scouting, right? So, very important part of that. I thought that they gave that definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, James. And another thing about like just seeing this culture is like, you know, I knew about trip hop from afar, like from the States, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about the culture of it. I didn't know about Brixton, or, you know, like what other cities was it more popular in?
Bristol
yeah.
is often considered, like
Bristol,
the heartbeat of.
I don't know why I said Brixton. Where'd Brixton come from? The Guns of Brixton?
Brixton's important musically too. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, nice. So he gets a really large reputation for, you know, being the record guy at the club. You know, knowing about all these records, having a vast record collection, right? And it's really cool how they were like, back then, I guess it's the mid '90s or late '90s. Not many people had big record collections, you know, like as DJs. So like, those people were like unicorn-ish, and I'm sitting here recording at Edwin's, and he has tons of records in the back. So he's like the next James Lavelle.
I wish.
anything you want to add to this nightclub era?
Yeah, so he's transitioning from, just, knowing his records and being the go-to guy at the record store to actually, getting out there and playing his records and DJing. And it was cool to see, it's cool to see all the people that they got to interview, but, seeing someone as influential as Giles Peterson and talking about their DJ club night that they had together. That was cool.
Right.
And so they're, James is playing all the new stuff, all the hot records at his club night. And then I think this is the transition where it goes from, record store to writing a record art column to DJing. Now the idea forming of I want to start my own label.
Yeah,
so you see this.
Well, before that, they're saying when he's DJing, he was making contacts, building a community, and then he heard a song from the Repercussions.
Yeah,
and then he flies to New York.
Yeah,
and I guess signs them to.
I think he pays the license.
Okay.
The song.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he gets the rights to to put out stuff. So that determination, that that moxie, if you will, to go out there and make things happen. Sure.
Yeah. And that was 92. So I'm sorry if I said mid 90s to late 90s. No, we're not there yet. This is early 90s. So it's 92 when he launches Mowax, and we get a lot of interviews, talking heads of Atticus Blues, whom I never heard of, but Attica Blues, which is, I guess, one of the first Mowax artists. And it's fascinating to see, the start of this relationship, how he's talking very warmly, and then later how it's just kind of resentment, right? We'll get into that when we get there. But am I missing anything?
So this is where he's starting to put out records and, working with artists.
The Psychonauts is another one.
Yeah, and so I heard over and over about, in the movie, the desire to want to change things, right? Mm-hmm. New guard, change, moving things forward. And so he's, professionally moving things forward in his own life, not just, musically. So he's working with Attica Blues, and you can sense that James was about like just getting things done. The guy from Attica Blues was saying, it's like James gave them the liberty to make the record and then just like put it out quickly. Mm-hmm. Like he said that James didn't make them have to record any demos. It was just like, record something and we'll put it out. So this urgency and just and then
urgency and like guerrilla-ness to it. Like let's just shoot it. It's almost like working with a director that says no rehearsals, we shoot the rehearsal.
Yeah,
like actors love that.
Yeah,
talent loves that. So
and James was saying that it's just like the intent was just fast releases, and a couple times throughout the documentary, they record this refrain where he's saying ching ching ching, kind of like mimicking the sound of a cash register or like coins dropping, just like get that money, make the money. So you could see he's got the artistic creative thing, but he's also thinking about making money. And throughout the doc he mentions money and wanting to sell millions of records. So you could see that business ambition in him as well. Yeah. That it's not just about artistic integrity and all that.
At one point, Heidi Farron, Mowax office manager, says in the interview or in one of the talking head sequences that it didn't really feel like working. It was nonstop mucking about. Mm-hmm. I love English terminology. Here we talk about that ching 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 thing. But yeah, that's fascinating how they just like churn stuff out. You know, it's one way to go about things and to kind of be the opposition, right? Be the kind of the what's the counter programming of studio stuff, where the studios are like, we gotta make a demo, we gotta go through all these different like professionally.
Yeah.
They gotta make it sound so clean, which is which is their right. They have to make a polished product, and so I'm pretty sure that was super appealing to up and coming artists to be like, oh, we want to bypass that. We don't want to work. We just want to put something out, and he gave those artists that outlet. I failed to mention Dr. Octagon, but Blue Flowers is like one of my favorite Dr. Octagon songs. I forgot that was released from Moax. Yeah, I love this little mini montage of like them putting out records and you seeing the artwork.
Yeah.
And then it's just like almost DJ Crush is another one. It was just like a mad rush to just and it was like a snowball effect, right? Because once you sign these artists, these other artists say, oh, they have a great working relationship. We want to be a part of that too, and then it becomes this whole movement.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And going back to what you're saying about the cover art, in this section of the doc, is really talking about the forward thinking of James, of like creating an identity. 3D from Massive Attack says that James really was creating the boutique label before boutique labels became a thing, right?
Yeah.
It's that. Like there was a certain aesthetic. He got Futura to do the album covers, and then 3D did some of the album covers, and you're just building this strong identity. I think somebody used, I'm not sure if it was James himself, but somebody in this part used that phrase, strong identity. Okay. That Moax had this idea, and like you knew it was a Moax record just by looking at it. And Chief XL from Blackalicious had said what he appreciated from James was his vision, forward movement, forward movement and like progression was kind of a big theme early on for sure.
Really quick, like hindsight note here, but I probably should say this for the end, but let me just mention it before I maybe even forget to say it at the end. But all this they're talking about it, like them coming and going into the office space, like there was just like a friendly space.
Yeah.
Like nowadays we have like offices like in Silicon Valley where it seems like it's like a communal thing, where it's
like a hangout session.
Yes, and there's a lot to be said about that. It could be very appealing. I could see that, right? Especially for artists, new artists, to come in and say, "Oh man, I want to be a part of that too." The downside of that, however, is that you really have no structure. Maybe you do, but it's very little. You're partying a lot of the time, and you're like mucking about, as they say, with friends, and you're unable to scale because at that point, if you don't have the proper team, like of accountants, whatever, of professionals that keep you in check, it's just gonna scatter. You're gonna have all these artists. What are you gonna do then?
Yeah.
You're just gonna be all over the place, and I think that ultimately is one of the reasons that led to the downfall. Is he just again, and it goes to the thing where you said like he doesn't have that rationality to see things through.
Right.
He's not like he of course he's making money, but he doesn't know how to organize that. You know what I mean? To a part where he can scale it bigger and make it a legitimate company.
Right, and this is a good segue point to the time where the label has built up interest and notoriety that major label A&M comes in the picture and wants to acquire Moax.
Before that, I wanted to mention how Andy Pemberton talked about the trip hop. And then how all these critics were Moax captures the trip hop vibe, right? So this whole trip hop thing is in the midst of this, the trip hop movement being born. But please continue.
Yeah, so this seems like a turning point for the label, for James, where, you know, it's really not a little indie label anymore. It gets linked up with A&M,
which is relatively big back then, right? I remember like Herb Albert and Sergio Mendes,
and
mainly like a world music label. But
in James is young at this point, so the amount of money that they gave him, you know, in today's terms,
small fortune,
doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But for him at that time, it was like, you know, I made it.
Yeah, I mean, you can even tell when there's a portion of here when they say it was one of the prior interviews, right? Where they're like, "Are you rich?"
Yeah,
and he's just like smirking. He's like, "Am I rich? Ask my accountant." You could tell it like went to his head.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And then this is where friends and associates start to, you know, distance themselves, leave the picture, burn bridges, you know. So Swifty, the graphic designer, it was the end of his association with the label and James. You could see how his relationships were changing. James was getting harder to get a hold of. You could see how maybe the money and just the higher profile, you know, may have gotten to his head, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
So this is where we start to see that side of his personality, which, you know, becomes this reoccurring theme throughout the movie.
And again, this is one of my criticisms of the film. I guess, you know, it would probably bog down the movie a bit to get into the politics of record company isms, but like, how much freedom do you actually have, right? When you're absorbed, when you merge with A&M like that, you're a small independent label within a major, but like, how much freedom do you really have at that point, right? Someone mentions that he was up a couple $100,000, and he was like, I guess when you're 21, that's a huge deal, right? But like, yeah, how much freedom do you think he or the label had at that time under A&M?
Well, I think at that time they probably were happy just to let him to continue to do what he did to make Mowax successful up to that point. So I don't. Who's to know how much freedom and autonomy he had? But I would guess that they didn't want to, you know, fix something that wasn't broken, but they definitely wanted a piece of the action. So they wanted a piece of the it factor that Mowax had. So, but it seems like James did have, you know, the freedom to fly out to SF and you know, track down DJ Shadow and become his friend.
Specifically, you mentioned how like he was burning some bridges at that time, and it was because of, you know, well, he gives an interview in the middle of that saying that like the majors deal with the money, with the financing, and I deal with the art, the artists, right, and the music. And then at that point, he was co-owner at that point is Steve Finan, Mowax co-owner, and he was like letting go of some artists, right? And they were saying that they were resentful of James, that he didn't tell them to their face. He got this other guy to do it for him, did the dirty work, kind of thing. So again, part of the whole, he's getting a big head there, and I believe Attica Blues is one of those artists that got let go in the deal with A&M, right? Because they had to scale and cut losses and stuff like that, right?
Right, and I think the guy's name is Charlie. Charlie from Attica Blues. He was one of the people that was saying that at this point James was just getting hard to get a hold of.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah. All right, so we get into the our favorite portion of the film, and it's DJ Shadow. Are we there yet?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
there.
And yeah, he's they hit it off, right?
Yeah.
Josh Davis, as he's called.
Josh Davis, yeah. They have a lot in common. You know, they're record heads. They like to go digging, and yeah, a lot of common interests. So
Yeah.
they hit it off, and DJ Shadow comes up with the biggest record in Mowack's history. Introducing, and that's a huge turning point for the label.
Was it introducing? I always thought it was science fiction. It was introducing.
Well, up to this point.
Okay. So yeah, they call it instrumental progressive hip hop. James called that in an early interview, and it's great to see. We're huge Scratch fans, and it's great to see this all this early footage of the what do you call that, like the basement, or the place where they record dig in San Francisco all the time, where like in Scratch, I think DJ Shadow was like curled in a corner, like playing on his portable record player, and then talking about how like all these like lost dreams is like it just represents all these lost dreams, all these people who recorded and didn't make it, kind of thing. And it always made me thought of that. And then showing him like with his MID, what do we call that? Or like
MPC.
MPC player. His sampler thing. All this footage is like, very Scratch vibes. Very. It's indicative. It's like it really defines what DJ Shadow is. Just this massive like crate digger who like looks so happy. He's like holding a bunch of records, and it's all this clutter. And to people with claustrophobia, that could be scary. But to him, he looks like so at home. It's amazing. Anything you want to add?
So the relationship with Shadow is strong. That they become Unkle, and it's each person going with their strength. So Shadow's the musical mastermind, and James is the idea guy, the editorial guy. Like, okay, let's do this, or let's work with these people, but not actually involved in like the actual writing of the music. And so that they're again playing to their strengths, and so they're incorporating just the imagery of all of the science fiction that James was into. So they mentioned 2001, Blade Runner, Star Wars. So you definitely see all that, and then just the the level of collaborators that they brought in. Richard Ashcroft, Badly Drawn Boy, Tom York. All names that are near and dear to me as indie rock lover, and then Mike D, Cool G Rap from the hip hop world. And so again, James did his part to bring in the talent, that's for sure.
Going back real quick to introducing, they mentioned it like being a masterpiece, and this is an album very near and dear to my heart as well. It's pretty much my first exposure to DJ Shadow and to this whole San Francisco scene with like DJ Automator, maybe Dr. Octagon, right? So looking at the track list, I can't really remember how they sound, but I do remember like Organ Donor, Midnight in a Perfect World, maybe even the Number song. Do you have any favorite tracks from the album that maybe you can think of, or what does your soul look like?
Not particular tracks, but just the overall like unified or like consistent mood. Like it's a very moody record, and I always associate just kind of like a certain like seriousness
Okay.
with that record.
Yeah. It says it samples. This is from the Wikipedia page. Samples music of various genres, including jazz, funk, psychedelia, as well as films and interviews. DJ Shadow program chopped and layered samples to create tracks, and I love the genre that they describe it as: instrumental, hip hop, trip hop, plunderphonics, sampledelia. Never heard of any. I never heard of any of the latter ones, but sure, sounds
works.
Between '94 and '96, introducing was recorded. In between that, released in the States in '96, so it didn't really gain traction till later in the States. Whereas in the UK, it was released ahead of time, so it got a lot of traction there. In between that, they start working on Unkle in I believe '95. And I'm sorry to go back, but yeah, the critics just freaking adored introducing, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, it was a complete head fuck, in a good way, right? Turning point for Moax, next level, you know. So where does that leave them, right? What are they gonna do next? Like, or is it gonna be an inevitable downfall, or right? Or are they gonna go higher? And apparently, they try to go higher with Unkle, which I'm of a different opinion. I'm not really a huge fan of Unkle, but apparently in the UK they loved it. What are your feelings of Unkle and science fiction?
I think for me it was heightened expectation just because of what DJ Shadow had last done, and the promotional build up, and it just looked cool, and the people involved were so cool. So I think for me, I had a lot of expectation and it had so much potential, but when it came down to the actual results, the products, I would have to say I was underwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely wanting more.
What were you expecting? Like more introducing-ish, or?
No, not necessarily. Like, I guess I was just expecting maybe more. I don't know how to say it. Fully formed songs. Like, it kind of made sense why I felt like it was a little incomplete when you saw the footage of them working with Tom York at Skywalker Ranch, and they just really had that day, right? So it's just working on that song for one day, and so maybe.
Oh, that song was from Unkle, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That was on the science fiction Rabbit in the Headlights.
Oh, right, yeah. Which they had the band MTV banned the music video, right?
And so it's like, I think that captures like the feeling I had, where it's like a good idea, but the final execution wasn't just, they didn't like fully nail it.
Yeah.
So that was my initial response. Like, I was so excited, and then when I finally heard it, I was just like, it was like good ideas, but just didn't like
interesting
hit it out of the park.
Do you think a lot of that has to do with, they're talking about in the documentary, Shadows did all the music, and then James Roll was more editorial, so it seemed like probably a lot of clashing, like Shadow would be like, no, I don't want to go this way, and then he had to do it James' way because he's ultimately the boss too, he's not only his collaborator, he's the owner.
Yeah, the documentary did definitely suggest that there was this tension that James would go out and party. Like, they even mentioned, like, in the middle of a recording session, I think it might have been when they were recording Badly Drawn Boy that James just got bored and left, and he took Osmond's credit card and just, left and presumably went to go party or something. And they had mentioned that partying was a big part of James's life at this stage, and that he was going overboard and partying to excess, whereas Shadow wasn't partying, and so you can kind of see this.
Shadow didn't drink or smoke at all.
Yeah, you could see them
opposite.
Have this tension. So maybe what we're talking about in terms of the final product could be a reflection of that dynamic.
Going back to what you said earlier, I do feel like, again, like I haven't heard science fiction in a long time, but I told you earlier, I don't know if I said this on when we were recording or not, but telling you that I didn't really like it, and it was I think I mentioned this earlier, that but yeah, going back to what you said, it does seem like the idea was there to make it this big. I love that idea of like making it this like a film, like this huge concept, epic fantasy, as they say about big albums. And it almost seems like Radiohead took that a step further with OK Computer, and to a further extent Kid A, when they went electronic. It seems like they're maybe inspired by, like Tom York maybe was inspired by
that experience.
The experience of recording with Unkle with so it seems like Unkle walks so Radiohead could run in a sense, so something good happened out of that. But I do just love that idea. It's just very ambitious of doing that. It just seemed like the concept was there, execution really wasn't, in my opinion. A lot of people like the album, so
we can tie that to, again, the idea and the intent being there, but not thinking it through.
Sure.
Like in the promotion, you had mentioned that the video for Rabbit in Headlights, it ended up getting banned. It's like, well, as a promotional move, that is probably counterproductive, because you want more eyes on it. This is before you can watch any video you want on YouTube. So it's like the very thing that's going to promote the record, people can't see it. And so it's like where James's idea wasn't necessarily backed up by just the rational thinking of like, is this going to work? And
he just went headlong into it.
And the movie had also mentioned, like, James had the vision and the ambition to get all these big names to work with, but they were signed to competing record labels, and they wouldn't allow those songs to be put out as singles. So they used, Richard Ashcroft as an example. Like, he's signed to Virgin, and Virgin wouldn't, okay them using the song he recorded with them as a single. It's like, okay, well, you had the idea to get these amazing performers, but if you couldn't put it out as a single, and then it's
like you could, sorry to cut you off, but just like thinking about like the concept artwork and everything, and the name of DJ Shadow, I remember just being really drawn. It was very alluring.
You carried a lot of weight,
right? Sure. Just looking at all the concept art right now, it looked phenomenal. And then back then you could probably get away with that, because when you buy the album, and then you listen to it, it's kind of a piece of crap. I don't want to go as far as that, but like, it's not what you expected. It was a hassle to return that, and I couldn't return it because I already broke the seal. You know what I mean? So these days you cannot get away with that. If you have a great concept, you need to follow it through with good music, So, and they didn't do that.
But it certainly sold a lot of copies.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people, what the general impression was. I know in this documentary they'll show like reviews for that album at the time.
Yeah, it was like groundbreaking or something.
Yeah, so I think people
Yeah.
maybe didn't see it the way we saw it, but they praised it.
Right. Yeah. And before this, there was a section where you were talking about how James was out partying all the time and DJ Shadow wasn't. And then in one of the interviews, we get to see a one later where they like zoom in on DJ Shadow as they're both being interviewed. Well, just James is talking, and then we saw a kind of a prelude to that when like DJ Shadow in an earlier interview, James is pontificating, talking, what have you, and DJ Shadow's just like, oh, what the fuck am I doing here? Kind of look. Is like you already tell the tension's already there. Like I can imagine James not very fun to work with.
And
very volatile.
A big wedge that comes out between the two that is evidenced by that MTV interview that you're talking about is resolving the issues of the songwriting splits.
Yeah.
And DJ Shadow rightfully felt like I made all this music.
Right.
The vast majority of the credit should be mine, if not all of it.
Exactly.
Other than the lyricists and
right.
the other maybe people that we sampled, but James saw himself as an equal.
Yeah.
That he should be given songwriting credit because he was a big hand in putting this all together and assembling the collaborators and all that. Whereas Shadow saw it as, well, that's just more of an A&R role.
Yeah.
You're not a writer.
He's more of a creative director. Yeah, he had the concept and like maybe he had the pull to bring in the artist to see that through, to manifest whatever ideas he had in his head. But yeah, he no input in the songwriting, no input in the production. From a technical viewpoint, he shouldn't get any songwriting credit. He shouldn't be able to take money out of Shadow's kids' mouths. I don't know if he had any kids, but metaphorically.
Yeah.
As an artist, I would be livid. No, why should I give up my residuals for something that you had no input in? You know what I mean? And it's such a difficult situation because he's the owner of the record label.
Yeah.
How do you say something like that to him? And he's your partner in this project. Both of your names are attached to Unkle. It is a really tough position to put DJ Shadow in. I hope I don't know if they get into how they resolve that at all in the documentary, but I hope he stood his ground. I know they had a falling out after that, but he should stand his ground for sure.
Yeah, I think the documentary did say that Shadow stood up for himself and his work,
good.
And James didn't get the splits that he was looking for.
Yeah.
But certainly,
rightfully so.
You see this growing rift of James seeing himself more as an artist, and so there's a part in this section of the movie where they make a song with Ian Brown from Stone Roses called Be There, and they're performing on TV, and I think they said that this was the only televised performance or live performance where Shadow is performing with Unkle, and so DJ Shadow's doing his things on the turntables and Ian Brown's singing, and James, he wants to be performing, but he's just given 3 notes to play on the keyboard, so he's there on stage, but he's feeling rather insignificant
purely for window dressing, just to be part of something, right?
Like they're tossing him a bone, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to harp on this subject too long because we've been talking about Unkle for a while. I was a huge part of the documentary anyway, but yeah, like what he says he put everything together. He got all the artists together, and it's his concept. But Shadow actually sat down and produced stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And wrote the songs. What technically is that position that James Lavelle? Is it a producer? Like producer, like tells you how to like, oh, sing that note higher, kind of. Does he even do that or no? Right? Because there's no there are vocals.
He could be like, this, and we see it later on where he's like, yeah, this doesn't sound right, and so he can put in that feedback.
So, but that would count as a producer, right?
Seems, but kind of, in the school of maybe like the way Rick Rubin produces. Like Rick Rubin, would admit he doesn't know much about like music theory and this and that, but he has confidence in his artistic sensibilities, and he knows what sounds good and what doesn't. And perhaps James is similar to that. He's like so he can have that input, but that's not necessarily songwriting.
Right. Yeah. And from DJ Shadow's perspective, he says in the documentary that he came in and checked in and said, "How's it going?" Mm-hmm. And as opposed to me sitting down and producing the beat like for hours on end, So I get it's a matter of perspective. It was his concept. He did put it all together, but that sounds more like a consultant role. It doesn't sound like a producer role. Mm-hmm. And if he did sit down and say, change this lyric here or go crazy on this solo here or whatever, then I could see that, he'd get a producing credit. But it seems to me from Shadow's point of view, like he didn't do that at all. Mm-hmm. He came in when he wanted to, was partying late night maybe, and come in and say, "Hey, how's it going?" Yeah. Like, I don't think that deserves, writing credit at all. So, shall we move on, or do you have anything else to add to this?
Yeah. So, I think at the same time, they're saying that he was a pioneer in a lot of senses, like brand collaboration, which is a common thing these days, wasn't so much back then. But Moax was doing brand collaborations with clothing labels and shoes, and like Nike and toy brands, and so they were saying he was a pioneer in that way.
Real quick, there's the
yeah.
So before that, we didn't mention the release of Unkle, which is a huge phenomenon. It was like all over the news, right? Especially in the UK. 5-star review, is branded as like heralded as like the second coming. Not really second coming, but it was huge news, So, but I think, that had a lot to do with James's mindset of kind of expanding and collabs, and that was cool seeing like the J's, like the Air Jordan 1s, like have Unkle or Moax designs on it. Like one of the first collabs I've ever seen with the shoe brand. There probably have been others, like other hip hop, maybe like Tribe Called Quest or something. But that was really cool.
So at this point, it really should be the setting the stage for further, just success for Moax, but it is kind of the beginning of the end.
Sure.
You had mentioned that there's an issue and there is a conflict of interest when the boss of the label is an artist, and right, it's like, how can you say no to the boss?
Exactly.
And so Steve Keenan had, I'm paraphrasing, but basically he said there's a problem when the owner wants to be the principal artist on the label, and that's the position that Moax and James are in, and he's alienating the artist. There's media backlash, just as much as there were positive reviews. I think there were a fair share of bad reviews for science fiction, kind of mirroring our impressions of the album. And that brings us to the Polygram merger, which really does, signal an important.
Yeah. To go back real quick to what you're talking about. Oh, yeah, I think you were talking about Finan, right? He's the co-owner of.
Oh, Finan. Did I say Finan? Sorry.
Oh. You said Keenan. But yeah, when you put all your money in in your own projects, I don't think that's really optimal, right? And they're talking about where does his, I don't know, he's kind of all over the place at that point, right? Where does his allegiances lie? Is he an artist? Is he A&R guy? Is he running things? How little attention does he give to other artists now at this point? You know what I mean? So it's very kind of crazy time. NME calls it the record of the year. You know, all this shit we're talking about, the reviews. I guess most of the reviews were good. So, and at that point, what do? You have all this praise. Where do you go from there? You can either go higher or you can go straight down, right? And it seems like what the documentary is saying is they kind of went down from here, right? Is that where we are from now?
Yeah. So
yeah, you're talking about the Polygram merger.
Yeah. So Polygram merges, A&M gets shut down, which effectively ends the deal with Mowax. So Mowax doesn't have any control over its back catalog. Everything's under the control of Island. And as you were asking earlier, like, did James get any writing credit? The movie said that he didn't have any writing credit for science fiction. So basically, he doesn't have anything. So Mowax is done. James gets upset that all of the artists are leaving. Well, there's no label, so
right.
They're leaving. He feels
you're
like
not a good friend to them in the beginning.
They're abandoning him. DJ Shadow doesn't want to do any touring to support the album.
Yeah. Oh, sorry to correct you real quick. It wasn't Polygram. Well, Polygram. Both of those labels are under Polygram, but Polygram was under a lot of pressure financially, so they had to merge A&M
with Island.
Okay. Yeah, so Island pretty much ate up the Mowax catalog. But continue.
So this is where the relationship between Shadow and James ends. And again, it's just we're going to see that we've seen it in the past. We're going to see it more in the future of people can only work with James for so long before they need to leave.
It's different too when it's like, they most of those artists that he signed earlier were his friends, but like they didn't work with him directly, to produce the record, whereas Shadow and James were like, I don't know if they're bunking together, but they were spending a substantial amount of time together, and I can imagine, a person like James is kind of erratic and volatile of personality to deal with. It can be quite, unsustainable, to say the least, right? So yeah, we're at the point of Island here. Mowax and no more, you say? He was 24 at the time, by the way.
Yeah, Mowax is no more until Osmond finds them a new home with the Beggars Group under XL. And so now they have a new home. And again, another reoccurring pattern is James finds a musical-minded person to assume the role that DJ Shadow had as, the music mastermind. And so a guy named Richard File, is that right? Richard File becomes his principal Unkle collaborator. And so they, again, continue to work with big names: Jarvis Cocker, Brian Eno, Josh Homme. And so this is working on the next Unkle album.
And I mean, this probably goes without saying, but with Shadow not going on tour with Unkle, Probably just, yeah, naturally, right? Because they weren't getting along anyway at the time. And so, this is more of a technical thing. When Unkle tours, Shadow gives none of the revenue of that, right? Because he's not present. Is that correct?
Right.
So he only gets residuals from, like, physical album sales later on digital downloads, right?
Sure, and maybe airplay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I would rather just, yeah. If you're not, imagine you're already done with him and you're like, oh, we got to go on tour now. It'd be a lot like the two leads in Almost Famous.
Mm-hmm.
What was the band's name in there?
Was it Breakwater or no? Breakwater?
Something water, right? Bad water?
I think it was Breakwater.
Breakwater? Doesn't sound right. I hate when this happens. We'll look it up later.
Yeah, okay.
Let's just not know.
Yeah.
Let's just, because one of us, one time or another, we're gonna be like, we're gonna say it, and we're like, oh yeah. So at this point, yeah, James takes a little break. Well, Shadow takes a break too. He mentions in an interview where he's like, what's that with the Moax? And he's like, that's up to Moax and Polygram, right? So Shadow's taking a little break before he does his next album. And then when he does his next album, I think I believe it's under like Interscope or something. James takes a break. He gets married, right? Finds a girl. They have a kid. And I think that's after Unkle tours, right? And he has a kid. And they sign with XL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To return to his indie roots. And they get to work on, like as you said, the second album, right? And who's he collaborating with this time?
Richard.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
What was his last name?
I think it's Richard File.
Oh, Richard File. Yeah. Okay, yeah, nice. Yeah, he looks like an alien. Sorry. Have you ever listened to the second album at all?
Maybe some songs here and there.
Yeah.
I think the one that they did with Josh Homme was probably the one I heard the most. But
yeah, I like his interviews in this film because he talks about when he first met James.
Yeah.
Like he talks about how he mentions like the DJ as a combiner of things.
Yes.
And I just love that quote. It was so perfect.
And at first, how like he probably thought that James was a joke because he would send him a song, quote unquote, idea, but it was just like this bare bones, just inkling of an idea or a song. Yeah. But then he could see how it was maybe more just kind of like an outline, and it, they would fill in the blanks together. But yeah, at this point, I think I kind of saw James as other prominent creative people that maybe I'm definitely not an expert in, but I would hear their process.
Stillwater,
nice.
Sorry,
okay, got
sorry.
It.
See, that's what it just popped in.
But like other creators, like I'm no architectural expert, but like Frank Gehry, how he would draw like a rough sketch of a building and give it to the engineers and the other people who would take that idea and make it come to life, where or Jeffrey Koons, where he'd have an idea for a sculpture and he's not the actual one like crafting it, but he'd give it to craftspeople. And so I see James as that, like he'll give an idea and he can't like bring it to life himself, but he will like give it to people that can make it come to life.
Yeah, like almost like a coach, or like like a pep talker. I don't know. Yeah, he's not quite the artist, but he wants to be one so bad, right?
Yeah.
And someone said some earlier, I think it was Brian Eno or something. He said he just couldn't write music.
Yeah.
Right. And it makes me go back. It brings me back to the early interview when James was saying how, and he was talking about DJ Shadow, how he samples things.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, these days you don't have to be like a classical musician. You don't have to play the piano for 10 years. You don't have to play this and that instrument for 10 years. You could just like make music, like sampling.
Right.
So to me, it felt like he was so like impressionable by like DJ Shadow sensibility of sampling that he thought like anybody could do it.
Yeah.
When in fact, like, it's not that easy for Shadow to do his job. Like, he still has to, like, it's really time consuming, right? Yeah. Not only does he have to find the right sample that he likes, but he has to, like, lay a track over it, maybe, add some 808s and, like, structure it. And, like a normal songwriter would, like a typical producer would. He doesn't understand that. He just thinks that anybody could do it.
Yeah.
And, that's a huge fallacy. It's going to be why he's ineffective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I hate to be like this the whole like shit on James Lavelle this whole podcast, but
I think this movie does a good job of highlighting his strengths just as much as his limitations.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's just like a diss piece on James. I think it's very even-handed.
Yeah. Because he had a lot of strong points, like business-wise, in the early days. He's a great people person. He's a great networker. And it's just that he doesn't know how to sustain it,
Right, and he's got, great musical taste.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's what got it all started. But going back to, the second album, so Neverland just couldn't follow up on science fiction's album sales.
Yeah.
And the record label loses interest. And Island drops them.
All the reviews are saying the Great Californian took the soul away.
Right. They attributed all of the significance and all of the success to DJ Shadow.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to the next phase. And again, they also said that this is also happening during the emerging prominence of MP3s and pirating and downloading. And so music sales just in general go down.
I don't know why this just popped into my head, but there was an earlier interview when James was talking about trip hop, and then they mentioned Portishead and Tricky, and they asked him, "Why didn't you sign them?"
Yeah.
And he was just like, "I don't want to talk about it." What do you think happened there? Another burning of the bridges, maybe, or
perhaps? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I.
It's not enough information to infer, right? But it seemed like it was like in his grasp, maybe, or no. You know what? I think because he was an indie label, they probably wanted to be more comfortable.
Yeah,
and they did achieved, significantly more commercial success than other indie labels would. Even who did Massive Attack sign with?
It's a good question.
Yeah, you don't have to answer that, but it's probably a better option, right, than Moax. Probably more commercially viable, right? So Momax is in debt at this point. That's what happens when you put all your money in your own artist, yourself as an artist, and you don't, you should be diversifying and finding other groups that, because at the very least, you'd be hedging your bets, right? If my album flops, at least I get this other group that's doing great. Like maybe I get a 15-year-old girl group or something that kids will buy. But I'm just being facetious there. But you got to be more business savvy than that. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. Even I know that. Come on, man. But yeah, so they're saying how Neverland. I think somebody said it was not a bad record. It just wasn't, as a follow up to science fiction, it wasn't good, right?
So business-wise, everything's just going bad. So Moax is in debt. James gave they mentioned he signed a band called South that he really believed in, but it was a financial failure. The label goes dormant, so James is pretty much on his own now.
Yeah, XL, I believe, loses £2 million investing in Moax.
And so his
not a good
next
decision.
move is to go back to DJing. So he becomes a very busy DJ, house DJ. He's a resident at Fabric for 5 years and doing quite successful with that. And but it also brings just the nonstop partying.
Sure, drugs, drinks.
And so
on top of being a dad.
Right, his mom says, she feels that he was lucky to be alive with all of the hard partying that he did. He cheats on his wife.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was his words or whose words, but the documentary mentioned that he was at war with himself. I think it was probably his own words.
His own words, yeah.
And so he's dealing with issues that he'll continue to fight with for some time. And then the next phase of his musical journey is hooking up with Chris Goss.
Man, you're just like clockwork. Like the movie's playing in the background, and like you say Chris Goss, and he shows up. It's like, what the hell? Did you write this movie?
And so that kind of injects some new life and some new collaboration into the music.
Yeah, and then he hooks back up with the dude from Queens of the Stone Age, right? What's his name again?
Josh Homme.
Josh Homme. Okay, yeah. For Unkle, right? I believe.
Yeah.
So are they working on the third album at this point?
Yes, War Stories, I believe.
Okay, and that is under a new label as well, right?
Yeah.
It was like a new boutique label, I believe. Was it Surrender All?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And so working with Chris, who James was introduced to through Ian Astbury of The Cult, Chris is able to kind of bring out the creative, artistic, musician side of James that I think he always wanted to think he had, right? So he's starting to sing and be the main vocalist. So they have a song, "Hold My Hand," and that's James's first vocal for an Unkle record. So that's
on War Stories,
a big artistic turning point for him.
It's great that chart though, that the physical sales, how each Unkle album just kept declining. It's just bad timing, really, with Napster and MP3s, and
because
piracy.
We know that musical sales don't always reflect the quality of an album,
sure.
And so it doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't good music, but it just shows just the waning interest.
Right. Highly niche and highly stylized for a certain niche, right? So he's saying he has accrued a lot of debt at this point, and album sales dropping, so he couldn't pay his debts that way. So they had to tour. So the world tour. He meets a new wife. I believe she is
Lorna.
Okay, yeah. And she's also like a collaborator on one of the albums, maybe a singer.
Okay. That I don't know.
Is it? No. Okay, maybe not. That's what I just thought. I just like assume, because like everyone in the music industry is like meets each other through work, or I signed this new singer and then I married her, kind of thing.
The movie shows footage of the performances. You could see it's crowded.
Yeah,
and people
Mexico
are
City,
definitely
Dublin.
into it.
Absolutely.
But again, it also shows another relationship fraying. So the relationship between James and Richard is
who's Richard?
The guy that like plays guitar and later he's bald.
Oh, okay. Is he like one of the main collaborators?
Yeah,
of the new Unkle?
he's like
Okay.
one of the principal collaborators at
Yeah.
this point.
And I like, the sense of, the sprawling nature of like going through time. James is a bit older now, he divorced, new girlfriend, new collaborators. I don't know how long is that going to last.
Right.
Right? So it's just the same old story again, right?
And then
same old song.
Rich leaves, and then in comes a new collaborator,
Pablo,
who is someone that
You say it and it just like pops up. Are you clairvoyant, Edwin?
And that reoccurring theme of just like someone to fill that vacuum.
Yeah. It just goes to show your comprehensive note taking. You guys can't see this on the podcast, but he has like 4 or 5 pages of notes. I have nothing. I have a text edit with like 1 paragraph. So that's why I'm playing the film in the background so I can like reignite my memory here. But great job note taking here. Edwin came prepared.
And so
noted.
They're incurring debt, and
Ching, ching, ching.
he's just having to find new ways to get money. So they figure out that if you can license your music for film and TV, that'll bring the money. So they do that and continue to DJ.
And they had wages because they had a new company, so they had to pay everybody their wages.
And I could see James wanting to take care of the people that work for him. And giving them a wage.
Clothing company, starts a clothing company.
I think this is something you can sympathize with when James is DJing around the world. He's saying that it was a lonely experience. And a lot of, I think popular perception is, the DJ, you're at the center of everything, and the crowds adore you. But there is something to when he says it's a lonely experience.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. For sure.
That might be a whole nother podcast.
Exactly. But I can. I can speak more for myself. But just going on gigs locally is even lonely. Just driving to LA or recently driving to Newport by myself. It's not bad because I have time to listen to a podcast on the way. But like being there, by your own, it'd be nice to have a partner sometimes. Which is why like my wedding gigs I love because my business partner like sets everything up for me. I just come and play music and like we gel as a business partnership. But I can only imagine like going on tour and going to different cities far away. Going on a plane. That's incredibly lonely. So he still you're right. He has accrued all this debt. DJing is not taking care of it apparently. So he has to.
They actually run out of money while they're recording the next album. Where did the night fall?
That's the 4th album.
I think it's the
third. The third.
And so,
James
and Pablo, they put in their own money just to get the album finished. And so it gets bad reviews, if not scathing reviews.
I mean, they're not making money touring. Well, they can only tour if there's a new album, so they need to make a new album just to to cover the debts, So it's this terrible position to put yourself in. At that point, as a more financially knowledgeable person today, at that point you just what do you call that? Count your losses and you find something else. But he was just so. How can you do that? That's your whole life. You really. The dream is. You made. That's the thing. Well, I'll talk about this more in my final thoughts. But like, you made the dream. You realized your dream. You peaked really early. How do you walk away from that? You know what I mean? You're like, I gotta give it another shot. And that's what he's trying to do, right?
I think it's half glass full, half glass empty. Like, some people would criticize him, say, man, you should realize when something's not working and just, stop. But other people may say, wow, I really admire how he just kept persevering and going.
Consistency. Chase the dream, right? So they're in the process of still recording it.
Right,
still,
and Surrender All, because the album just doesn't sell well.
Wait. Before that, they had like a deadline, right? They're like 6 months.
Oh, yeah, that was, yeah.
They're like 6 months, and they're like, they couldn't even think of anything at that point. They're like struggling.
Right, they were under a lot of stress, but eventually the money runs out.
Yeah. They got like, what did they say? They have 6 months to lay down 10 tracks. They said musically they're way behind. They had to produce 10 tracks in like 2 days or something.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus.
And poor guy Pablo, you could just see the stress.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like, and there's a time where he's just ready to walk away.
Yeah.
And eventually he does.
Right. Have you ever listened to any of the third album? At this point, you're probably checked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, they're in the process of producing this third album. They're on the clock, a lot of pressure. You can tell everyone's just like sleepless. And I believe they have a meeting, and they say that they don't have anything ready.
Right. We need more time.
Yeah. There's no money left, and they just say everybody's gonna do their best, right? Then we get a title card that says, "Where's the title card? It was here or somewhere." Sorry, give me a second.
Speaking of the title cards, I liked how it was reminiscent of like Aliens.
Oh, okay.
Or yeah, like when the
yeah.
The text would appear like on the computer
Yeah.
screen. I thought that was cool.
It comes up here once, and I'm gonna cut this dead air in a bit, but it came up here. Come on. Okay. James and Pablo invested personal funds to complete the album. Okay, I guess that was it. So yeah, their aesthetic is different. You don't see those two
Future,
alien things. Yeah. Yeah, apparently the Pitchfork says undistinguished songs, hamstrung by personality vacuum, without any idea what the mood is supposed to be by the Sunday Times. Time hasn't been kind to James Lavelle. Pretty much got shit on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Even aesthetically, it seemed all over the place, not consistent with their usual.
Yeah.
I think they were trying to maybe even... it was their fourth album, by the way.
All right.
But I believe they're just trying to reinvent themselves, kind of distinguish themselves as another entity altogether, under a new label, too. And, yeah, we're getting to the end here. I think Unkle's no more. Surrender All is no more.
His relationship with Pablo is done. He's pretty much left with nothing.
Yeah, with storage space to leave all his records, and his pretty much Unkle's a fond memory now at this point.
Right, and his marriage to Lorna ended in divorce.
Yeah.
James says everything I touched just failed.
Yeah.
He also says I constantly throw things away. So he even sees it in himself. He realizes his weaknesses, and he also says he wants to change his quote nocturnal narcotic lifestyle.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
this is another turning point for him where he wants to try and fix some of the things that have plagued him.
I failed to mention this earlier. We get a shot of the camel bobsled racing of the videotape of, or is it a cassette tape of the DJ Shadow little like 24-minute chick mix scratch session he does with all the DJ Shadow stuff. And that was technically my first exposure to DJ Shadow, was that awesome, scratch session that Qbert does. And I gotta highly recommend that to all the hip hop heads out there. That's Camel Bobsled Race by DJ Qbert via most of the tracks of Introducing of DJ Shadow. So, excuse me. Yeah, we're getting to the end here.
So James goes off to Sri Lanka. He's like trying to find himself, trying to just recenter.
Mm-hmm.
And then that really leads to kind of the last phase of the
Right.
movie, a redemption of sorts.
Oh, well, who says this? I love this quote where he said like, you look in the mirror or something, and you're the reason for all the relationships that have failed. Like,
Oh, that when you look around, it's you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
It's not them. It's you.
Exactly. So it reminds me of it's a great quote from Justified, which says that in a nutshell. There's probably a better quote that summarizes it better, but okay, when you oh, you know what? I'll think about it later because it's not coming to me right now. But okay, no. You run into asshole in the morning, you run into asshole, right? You run into an asshole all day, you're the asshole.
Yeah.
Right? I love that. I love that so much. It's such a great quote. It's all about perception, right? You're the fucking asshole if you keep running into assholes. Yeah, this storage space is crazy, man.
Yeah.
He kept all his vinyl. A lot of great memories. It's all just a cherished memory at this point, right?
Right. So the movie transitions from showing this storage space with all this amazing collection of all of the stuff, that he's gathered, records, artwork, memorabilia, flyers from club gigs and stuff. And it segues into the last part where he gets asked to curate that year's edition of the Meltdown Festival at the South Bank Center, which is a big deal, right? They mentioned past curators, Bowie,
wow.
Robert Smith from The Cure, this and that, and
was it Robert Smith? I thought it was Patti Smith.
I'm sure, but I know Robert Smith did curated a Meltdown. I think
nice.
Iggy Pop does
Yoko
one,
Ono,
Morrissey.
Patti Smith, John Peel, Bowie, wow, Nick Cave, Elvis Costello, Jesus, Jarvis Cocker, Jane Bees, I believe, is the person who asks him, and he gets all the artists, most of the artists from the significant artists from Motown, sans Massive Attack, which they really thought that he should be in there.
Right, and I think the documentary does kind of like build up the drama of like, is this going to work? Because up to this point, the movie has shown James to be like full of ideas, but fails when it comes to executing it, just right. So can he pull it off? I think is kind of like the big question at this. And so he's going back to all of his old relationships, but it's stirring up past resentments and hurt feelings and burnt bridges. I think this is, in this part, the part where it might be you that's the problem. I think that's where this comes up.
Sure.
But it ends up being a successful experience. Like he is able to make it happen. So I think one big sign of redemption and forgiveness is Shadow coming back to participate in the festival. One thing that I don't know if the movie answers for me is to what extent James does come to term with the issues that he was fighting against. Like, was he successful in dealing with those issues, whether it was relationship issues or maybe substance abuse issues? Like I don't think it really touches on that. It really just shows that the Meltdown Festival happens and it's successful, but that's one part that I wish they maybe touched on a little bit
Absolutely, more. I really agree with you there, because it seems like it's kind of rushing towards the end at that point. It doesn't really know how to resolve all of those issues that were brought up, or maybe they don't want to. Maybe it's going to be just a constant struggle with him to deal with those issues till the day he dies, kind of thing. But even so, like they didn't even do a good job of pointing that out. You know what I mean? So it kind of just ends on this heroic, kind of redemptive moment of him bringing all these groups together that I'm pretty sure most of them, most of the people he asked to bring back, like said no because of whatever fallout that they had. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So,
but even people that had resentments, like Charlie from Attica Blues, they show him at the end, and it seems like he was able to forgive
right.
So there is some reconciliation.
Sure. And then he kind of another redemptive moment when he writes the song for one of the main writers of a Queens of the Stone Age song that becomes the title track, becomes a single, becomes and charts. So that's kind of validates him as far as like a songwriter, because he can actually write a song, or can he? Maybe was that really him? We don't know.
Right.
From what this documentary has kind of put forth, like probably not, but who knows? Maybe he turned a corner somehow, writing with, working with the correct collaborator. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You never know. People change, and if anything, that's a thematic, through line of this is people change, and he changed for better or worse, but he changed, so.
Yeah.
One of the great music drops, by the way, is when, they mentioned the Shadow, when he comes back and actually,
performs
at Meltdown is, I forget what the track is called. I think they do, Lead Me Home by Luminous, I believe is the sample, but then it transitions into the track that DJ Shadow used it for as a sample.
Yeah.
And it's called like Blood on the something. It's called Blood on the something. Blood on the Concrete? I can't remember. It's Blood on something. Look it up, and it was a great. I remember it was a great song drop from needle drop from Better Luck Tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is the Justin Lin feature film that he broke out with to breakout success. And is there anything else from the documentary? That should about do it, right?
So if we want to, kind of recap, bring it home. I think the legacy, not that James Lavelle's gone or anything, but like the significance, I should say, of James Lavelle that someone mentions at the end of the movie is James, in this question of is he an artist, is he a musician or not, he is an artist, and someone said his paintbrush is the person. So his medium is bringing together people to make the things that he has ideas for, but he can't do himself. But dealing with the people and putting together the people, I thought that was a good way of putting it.
Sure.
And
he's a conductor.
People. He's like the glue that brings everyone together, and also the idea of him as the dreamer, who, like you said, had to learn and grow over the course of life to develop into a better person.
Right.
But
that's a great way of putting it. Before I get into ask you what your final thoughts are, but it reminds me of this scene in Steve Jobs, the Danny Boyle film, not the Ashton Kutcher. Danny Boyle with Michael Fassbender. In it, there's a really dramatic scene where Woz, played by Seth Rogen, they're like It's present day, I believe. Well, present day in the film, and they're saying because there's like 3 different flashbacks in the film, and he says like, "What do you do? What is your job? What do you do? You do actually do? You're not a programmer, you're not an engineer. You don't do anything. Like, what do you actually do?" Because he's like resentful of Steve Jobs of taking all the credit and stuff, right? And he says like, "I'm the conductor. I play you people, and you people play the symphony." Kind of. I'm misquoting.
Yeah, but I get the idea.
But that's what it reminds me of completely. You know what I mean? So, it says in the end here, James is constantly reaching for the stars, and I really like that quote because he's a dreamer. His ambition knows no bounds, and in that sense, I do believe he's an artist. Where is he technically an artist? Is he technically a producer, or is he technically a songwriter? No, but artist is such a broad term. In the case that he's a creative person, yeah, he's an artist. You know what I mean? So that's my take on it. He's a mad dreamer, and they say he's an artist in his own right at the end there. So, all right, yeah. So that's the end of our recap section of the podcast. Let's get into our final thoughts of the film and our rating. I guess out of 4 stars. Yeah. What do you think, Edwin? What's your final thoughts and rating?
I enjoyed it. I always like a good documentary that can shed some light on either something I don't know a lot about or something that I do like, but, learn more information about. And I felt like this was something that I known something about, but this really did take it a lot deeper. And so, when I do see a James Lavelle credit on a remix or a production credit, I can understand where that came from. And so I enjoyed it. I enjoyed just the archival footage, and the interviews. So out of 4 stars, I would give it I'd give it 3.5 stars.
Oh, okay. Nice. I was thinking of rating it very similarly, so we're very much on the same page here. Yeah, thank you for your very eloquent final thoughts and rating, my friend. Yeah, this movie, I really love films that go behind the scenes, that like from like any kind of celebrity culture, any kind of sports culture, because from all of those cultures, subcultures, we always see what's on the surface, right? What's presented by the media. We don't really get to go behind the scenes, behind the music, as VH1 would call it, right? So I always love going behind the music and seeing how producers operate, and going a step further and seeing how scouts operate, how I don't know if I technically want to see the engineers operate, but yeah, I wouldn't mind having like 1 or 2 in engineer interviews. But yeah, it seems like it was a really comprehensive biography of this person, James Lavelle, and his really quick rise to fame. It seems like he was very successful at first, and very good people person. And I really wish that he had, and again, it's one of my criticisms of the movie, but if he had the right like support system, if he had PR team, he had like the right people that would take care of all the little things that he didn't need to be bogged down by, I really could have believed that Moax could have taken the next level and been more, successful as it was. But
do you think that if he, just played with the strengths of just being the head of a label without trying to be an artist, that he would have done better, that the label would have been stronger?
Absolutely. That's I think if he just would have stayed in his lane and focused on what he did best, it would have been more sustainable, but that's his personality. He's very impressionable. He saw a way in, and he's always very musically inclined anyway. So he was like, "Oh, I could do that too." Did he do it in the most optimal way? No, but he got in, and he created Unkle with DJ Shadow, one of his best friends, a very two like-minded individuals, and ultimately, that was his peak, and then that was the start of the decline there. But yeah, man, I really believe if he had clear direction, if he had a bit more mentorship, I feel like these people that like bought up Moax or somebody, or all those people that were over him, just said, "Oh man, he's doing so good, just let him do his thing." Mm-hmm. If he had somebody to just like mentor him a bit, he could have had a much more sustainable career, But how do you do that when somebody was just so volatile and has his lifestyle of like DJing night in and night out, doing drugs, him collapsing relationships throughout his life? Like it's gonna end up happening. It's the way he's gonna learn. I really hope that he learns from all the relationships that he's destroyed and that he's had fallen outs with, and that he can do it again. I don't think he will. The music industry is a completely different beast now. Yeah. But who knows? He has the knowledge. I don't know if he necessarily has the connections anymore, but he's grown from it. He knows what to do better now. So it'd be nice to see a second chapter of him in this musical life. But I feel like he's put that behind him. You know what I mean? He's gone through so much. Yeah. I don't know what he's doing now. But it's a nice way to put a pin at the end of the film to say, he got this writer credit and he finally got on the Billboard and all that stuff, and it validated him publicly and all that good stuff, right? But where does he go from there? I'd like to know. It's always a continuing story, right? So final rating 3.5 as well. I really enjoyed this. It was a nice little gem. I remember just going through my archive of movies on my hard drive, and I was like, "Man from Moax, what is this? Why do I have this on my hard drive?" I thought it was about DJ Shadow, which I would say 1/3 of it, if not more, is about DJ Shadow, which is really cool. I really wish there were a DJ Shadow documentary. He's in scratch for a quarter of it, maybe less, but DJ Shadow is a great artist, and it really captures this moment in history. I really like it, and thank you for talking about it with me, Edwin.
Thanks for suggesting it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not as good as Scratch,
but it's a nice compliment to Scratch. Yeah,
absolutely. I knew nothing about the history of trip hop. Maybe in a footnote in Wikipedia entry, but because I'm not from the UK, so it's kind of alien to me. So to see it and to see how the culture developed and was birthed, and then how it ended, and ultimately how it ended, is a fantastic kind of cultural artifact, Yeah. So cool. That brings us to the end of our review of The Man from Moax. It looks like Edwin and I both really loved it, or really liked it at the very least, right?
It's really good.
Yeah.
It was not a waste of time.
Has there been any movie we reviewed that was a waste of time? You could say truthfully. Put you in a tight spot.
Not there. Any of the musical ones.
Okay. Some of the feature films, maybe.
But that was for another. Those are for other podcasts. So.
Oh, for other podcasts.
Yeah.
Best of the best.
Yeah.
How dare you? How dare you besmirch the legacy of Philip Ree and Best of the Best, being Korean American. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing you. Before we go, again, we talked about this earlier, but do you have any idea of any other movie we could... you mentioned Amy, the 2024 biopic.
The Back to Black one.
Is it Back to Black? Oh, yeah, it's Back to Black, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we could watch that one.
Okay. I know you mentioned before, Pretty in Pink.
Oh, yeah, if we want to do, movies with soundtracks,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and you also mentioned, a Tarantino film, but that may be too people review Tarantino movies to death already. Sure. Yeah, okay. I always love to review obscure movies that that are whoa, I never knew that movie existed too. You know, so this was definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Good call.
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us for the High Fidelity podcast where we talked about the man from Mowax. Again, check us out on Instagram at High Fidelity TV Podcast. Email us at highfidelitytvpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website. I believe it's highfidelitytv.wordpress.com. And we're looking to expand. I believe I'm going to start publishing our episodes on iTunes and Spotify. So check us out on there. I know I told you guys we're going to start a Patreon soon. Hopefully one day we will. So again, thank you again, Edwin, for hosting and joining me for the podcast.
All right, thanks for listening.
Thank you guys. See you guys next time.
Your fortune. Oh, how you love to whistle and sing. Oh, how you love to dance and swing. Your future life with joy will ring, with all happiness it will bring. You have a very sympathetic nature. You do devote a great many hours to the welfare of others. You have a very fine mind, and if you cultivate it properly, you will be very successful. You always walk as though you know exactly where you're going. People will respect you for your determination. You will endure some hardship in the near future, but eventually everything will turn out for the best, and unending happiness will be yours. Play again.
Now it's time for our wrap-up. Let's give it everything we've got. Ready? Begin.